Good morning, everyone. This morning, we're joined by Professor Patrick Johnson, an associate teaching professor in our Department of Physics. He's been a member of our community since 2014. And Professor Johnson, thank you for joining me for this conversation. It's wonderful to be here with you, and let's just jump right in and get started. Can you tell us about what brought you to be interested in physics? What drew you to this field of study?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, Jack. I really appreciate the time to chat with you. But for me in physics, just since I was a child, I loved deconstructing things, trying to figure out how they worked, and doing jigsaw puzzles. When we travel as a family, my mom would give me a book of logic puzzles and that would just keep me occupied for all of time. And so when I got to college, like many students, I wasn't completely sure what I wanted to do with it. I was kind of going engineering, physics. And ultimately what pushed it over the edge is I've always wanted to be like my older brother, and he was a physics major 2 years ahead of me. And so that got me to do the physics, and then he got a PhD in physics. I got a PhD in physics, and here I am now, 10 years later or so, something like that, and still loving it.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Now, this spring, you received the College Dean's Excellence in Teaching Award for your exceptional teaching and your commitment to the experience of our undergraduate students. You said that a life goal is to, quote, bring accessible discussions of science to the world, close quote. With this perspective in mind, tell us how you approach your teaching.
So when it comes to talking about physics, a lot of it, the goal of physics is always to try to understand how the universe works. And so on some level, you'd think that physics will be perfectly understandable to everybody because we all live in the same universe together. But not everything is as concrete as the projectile problems with a ball following sorry. Not everything is as concrete as a ball flying through the air. I just pre-recorded a lecture on electric flux, and it's this very abstract idea and very hard to wrap our minds around. And so trying to come up with concrete analogies, things that can kind of be like an anchor of understanding to then build on, is something that I always try to do. And I also just really believe in radical honesty with my students of just hey, I have a dog who needs to go to the vet today, and so I'm going to have to be away from my computer. I know I'll get to your questions later. I'm sorry, etc. Or talk about why I'm doing what I'm doing with the style of presenting my class, and then listening to their feedback when they write back. And so I just changed the way that I record my lectures a week and a half ago because of a student made a request, and I thought, you know what, that's a really good idea. And so I changed it. And I've just gotten an outpouring of students saying I didn't know that I was missing this until this moment. And so trying to just listen to my students as well as make these things a lived experience for them.
There's a related project you're working on focused on making physics more broadly accessible. Could you talk a little bit about the book you're writing?
Yeah, so this is kind of like a passion project of mine. Physics textbooks are great encyclopedic resources, and there's a place for encyclopedic resources, but I don't know if you've ever tried to read a physics textbook, but it's not easy reading. I love physics, and I struggle to read a physics textbook. And so I've been trying to write a much more conversational presentation of physics. I don't want to call it a textbook, because if I were to call it that, I think most people's eyes would glaze over and stop listening. But create a book that in a conversational tone presents the ideas of introductory physics to in a way that the general populace can understand. Richard Feynman, I'm sure many of his quotes, this is probably apocryphal and not quite right, but he always said that if you truly understand a thing, you can explain it to anybody, even if they don't have a technical background. And I really have a strong belief in that, I have found that throughout my years of teaching that when I find myself giving an explanation of something and then a student says, oh, but what about this? And then my brain is just relying on that same sentence that I just said. I'm I don't actually understand this. I need to go back and refresh my memory to be able to say this in a different way, use my own words kind of thing. And so I want to write a book that not only presents physics in this conversational way, but is also just freely available. Like I'm not doing this for like money or anything like that. I believe that knowledge is a wonderful resource. And so I just want to kind of put it out there as like a PDF on the internet for anybody, whether they're a Georgetown student or somebody in a rural village somewhere across the world who has access to the internet, but maybe doesn't have the money to buy a physics textbook. So,
sure. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
Now, you're also the author of the book, Physics of Star Wars,
Yeah.
the science behind a galaxy far, far away. Can you tell us some of the insights from this book as we think about making complex scientific principles accessible? How is this project helpful in introducing new audiences to these kinds of complex concepts?
Yeah, so that was a really fun project. I'm not gonna lie, I had a lot of fun writing that book. And the idea of why I had fun with this book beyond just the obvious of getting to talk about one of my favorite topics, or two of my favorite topics, is that like I wanted to write it with kind of a high school student in mind, of like somebody who's like a big fan of Star Wars, maybe has a passing interest in science, and like try to use this piece of culture that they love to inspire them to think more about physics. And like the goal of the book was to say, you know what, whatever I see on the screen, we're going to assume that that is the truth of the universe, and let me try to find a way to justify what I'm seeing on the screen using what I know about physics. And like, so really like take the movie as being like truth. And sure, I know everybody will say there's no sound in space, or a planet being shot by a Death Star shouldn't have a combustion explosion, and like lots of different things. But I took it upon myself to say, like, you know what? I want to find a way to explain how this is possible from like a standpoint of, I love this thing. And so I want to not be a person who's like, man, that can't happen. Just like say, like, this is what I love. This is what I love to talk about. These are the kinds of conversations I have with my friends on a Saturday afternoon. And so like to be able to explain them in ways of like exciting people about the thing that they love, and like bringing in a thing that I love to kind of like sneak the physics in with the excitement of the Star Wars is, yeah, that was my goal of the project. And I hope I've been successful. I've met a few young people who have read my book and have been very excited about it. And that's always exciting when I got an email from somebody who said they were a 12-year-old kid who read my book and was really excited and had a few more questions that I answered just last week. So it's always exciting to receive those.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Recently, you participated in the Doyle Faculty Fellows Program. And this is a program that supports our faculty in course design to further engage aspects of difference, equity, and inclusion in the classroom. You redesigned your course, The Science of Sound and Sight. Can you share with us what your experience was like in the Fellows Program, and what ways were you able to reimagine the science of sound and sight?
Yeah, so the Doyle program is just one of the greatest things that I've participated in since I've been at this university. Like, I have had a great experience at Georgetown across the board, but the Doyle Fellowship and the Doyle program is just absolutely wonderful. Like, we meet about once a month, faculty from all over the university, to talk about the way we handle our courses, and like to do some readings and reflect on how we can better align the goals of our course with the goals that you just detailed. And like hearing languages faculty talk about how they present material and assess their students, and philosophy, biology, like women and gender studies, hearing all these differing points of view, like really helped me think about the way that I assess physics. We physicists often think like, oh, here's an equation, put in some numbers, get me the number at the end, and that's the like best way to assess students. And that's like not at all the end all be all way to assess physics. And so like I redesigned my course to like be kind of a third about sound, a third about sight and light, and then the last little third of the class be about like the impact of science on our society, and having students think about how the ideas that we discussed in our course affect their day-to-day life. And like they get to do a final project. Just one example was a student who had a mother who worked with visually impaired people, like did a project associated with creating tactile maps, and went to the makerspace to 3D print a tactile map of Georgetown's campus. And so like that was just really, really cool way to go about that. And I think for me, it also benefited me in that it was kind of like reliving my liberal arts education as an undergrad, but now as a professor, where like when I was an undergrad, we were required to take courses in all kinds of different things. And I had plenty of my science colleagues be like, oh, I just want to take my physics classes. I just want to take my math classes. Why do I have to take this class in the humanities? And like, there's so much benefit to like hearing all the different perspectives, like taking your theology classes, your African-American studies classes, like all of these required courses at Georgetown that are outside of your field, or the Science for All requirement for those not in the sciences. I think it's very valuable to see those different perspectives.
And there's another way that you've collaborated with our colleagues at Candles, and that's through their technology enhanced learning, the TEL program. Can you tell us a little bit about the work you did around your Principles of Physics course and how you've used virtual reality tools to support your teaching? How can technology enhanced learning continue to inform teaching and learning as we go forward?
Yeah, so I really had fun with the TEL grant as well. They helped support purchasing virtual reality equipment that I then coded up a few simulations. It was a pilot grant, so just kind of a simple proof of concept. But as I was talking about before, the idea of an electric field is sometimes very abstract to students. Like there are electric fields surrounding all of us at all times, but like we don't see them, we don't feel them, we don't experience them. And so I wanted to create an experience where a student could enter a virtual representation of our physics lab that we have, and then walk around and like place charges and watch the electric field appear around them and change. And I have to give credit to, she's now graduated, but Katie Bonner was a physics major who also was very much into art, and she did the virtual space. And so credit to her for designing that aspect of it. I really wanted to give my students a way to experience these things in a more visceral way. And like just going beyond the TEL grant, like with the help of Candles, just as a smaller example, a member of Candles took my Principles of Physics class, I think 3 or 4 years ago now, and he suggested to me a way to record my lectures in a way that like I had been writing on a piece of paper using a document camera, and he showed me how to use a tablet hooked up to my computer to be able to record it. And so I've been doing that for the last 3 years now. And that's almost exactly what I'm doing now in virtual learning. And so it's like, it was kind of a training for a thing that I didn't even know I was going to have to worry about back in the day. And I am really sad that because of the virtual environment, we're not able to explore the virtual reality with my students this year because we're not on campus, but I look forward to being able to bring it in to my classes in the future and build on the pilot project that I did last year.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. As we bring our conversation to a close, is there a message you'd like to share with our university community?
Yeah, honestly, the thing that I would like to share with the Georgetown community is mostly a message of thanks to Georgetown, because I'm an associate teaching faculty. And when I first started at Georgetown, it was the year that the non-tenure line framework was put into place. And so I just happened to luck into getting a visiting professorship at Georgetown the year that this framework came into place. And this role is basically my dream job, is to be able to teach and work on enhancing my teaching with these other projects like the virtual reality, like the writing of books and things like that. And to have the freedom and the time to be able to focus on those side projects is very useful. And I think that Georgetown can be a model for other universities with the non-tenure line faculty framework. And I'm just very thankful that Georgetown puts forth this effort in valuing teaching in the classroom as well as teaching through research labs and everything else. I don't want to downplay the work of my tenure line colleagues, but I just am very thankful that this exists as creating a space for me to be a full member of the university community. I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Well, Patrick, thank you. Thanks so much for being with us today and for sharing your important perspectives and your approaches to teaching. It's so great for us to have this opportunity to be together, and we're grateful for all that you bring to our Georgetown community. And I look forward to being with all of you again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.